Okay, we're going to start with just some brief introductions. Ian and I are both ICMEC regional trainers, and we'll be presenting together today. I do want to say I'm extremely thankful that Ian is taking on the bulk of the presenting work this morning or this afternoon, because I've come down with COVID. So I'm feeling way better today than I did yesterday, but you might be able to hear in my voice that I'm still not feeling 100%. So I'm super thankful to have Ian here with me today. I'm Debbie, and before going into international education, I was a social worker in the San Francisco Bay Area. And now, as I said, I am a regional trainer with ICMEC. Ian, I'll let you do a brief intro.
My name's Ian Russell. I grew up overseas, and I'm currently in Santo Domingo. You can see what kind of my background there. I've taught everything from grade 1 to high school leadership, and served in a variety of positions overseas.
Awesome. And thank you all for putting where you are in the chat. It's always fun to see where everybody's tuning in from. And I was saying earlier, I'm very glad this isn't in person, because even with COVID, I'm able to be here with you all today. So just a little briefly about ICMEC. For more than 20 years, the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or ICMEC, has been involved in all facets of international child protection, including financial, legal, law enforcement, public health, and education. And they put together the Ed portal. The link for that is in the resource document that Abby sent out today. If you didn't open that email up, don't worry, it'll be waiting for you. But there is a link to the Ed portal, and it is a fantastic resource that has everything that you could look for child protection. And if you don't find something, feel free to email. I can ask Abby to share Ian's and my email after this, in case you have any questions afterwards that didn't get answered. You're free to email us. And
sorry, Tina, hang in there.
ICMEC's vision is a world where children can grow up safe from exploitation, abuse, or the risk of going missing. I want to briefly touch on our safe space agreement. For sure, in this training, we have survivors of abuse and supporters of survivors. So strong emotions are okay. If you need to step away, we won't ask any questions. Like Ian said, we love to have your camera on, but if you need to turn it off for a minute, that's okay. If you do happen to share any information today, please anonymize any cases that you share, like teacher A, student B. Just don't give identifying information. And please don't share any cases you hear about here. We will do a case study today without explicit permission from us to share the case. And finally, be kind to yourself. We've all made mistakes, and this training might make you reevaluate a concern that you had before, and you might realize you could have done things differently. Don't beat yourself up. We're all learning to do better. For today's purposes, I just want to define self-generated child sexual abuse material. That is the explicit imagery of a child that seems to have been taken by the child themselves, or a video. And this might be consensual, or it might be coercive. Often kids refer to consensual experiences as sexting or sharing nudes, and we will use those terms today as well. If you have any questions, please do put them in the chat. Ian's monitoring the chat, and I can't see it, but Ian will monitor it and let me know if there are questions that pop up that you want us to go over. All right, I want to give a brief quiz, and I will ask you to answer in the chat with more or fewer. So the first question is, what do you think? What % of young people ages 11 to 16 have sent a naked picture or sexted? Do you think that % is more or fewer? Should be more or less, right? More or less than 35%. Yeah, more or less than 35%.
All right, so the chat is very active with lots of more, and it continues to carry on with more.
Okay.
Predominantly, majority is more.
So I suppose this is good news then, that it's actually around 17% of young people ages 11 to 16 have sent a picture, a nude picture or a sext. So fewer than you thought, however, still significant. Second question, what percent of first receivers shared the picture they received with someone else? Do you think that's more or less than 20%?
Less, more, less, more, more. Looks like it predominantly more with a couple less, but predominantly most people feel more.
Okay. Again, good news in this situation. It's a lot less. About 7% of the first receivers might share it on. So generally, if someone is sharing with one person, they're not likely to reshare that. Final question. What percent of the second receivers forward the image to someone else? So of that 7% who do forward, now we have a second receiver, right? So if I have sent something to Ian and Ian does choose to send it on, what percent of that second receiver forwards the image? I hope that question makes sense. Is it more or less than 40%?
Okay, so we've got, this is pretty split here with more, less, fewer. This is interesting. This one is very split, Debbie.
Good.
More or less, yeah.
Okay, so this is actually high. It's 61%. So more than 40%. It's about 61% of the original, of the ones who receive it second do forward it on. So at that point, it becomes kind of an anonymous open image that's being shared. So that's
so they don't necessarily have a personal connection with it. They've just received it and they're passing it on. That's interesting.
Correct. So then it becomes something that's out of your hands entirely and it's gone. So although there are 17% of young people sharing nudes in the first place, and only 7% of the recipients share, it does only take one share to start this cascade where then it just is out of their control and it's gone and everybody's sharing. So what we're hoping today is to talk about ways to prevent or respond. Sorry, Ian, what was that?
Oh, one of the comments, prepare for the worst, hope for the best.
Exactly.
Yeah, good statement.
So the first question that this training asked is how much are children actually sharing nude images? So this is a study that took place in the US of children 9 to 17 years old. And you can see the stats here. So 17% have shared their own images. 32% of LGBTQ plus youth have shared their own images. 21% of students age 9 to 12 think it's normal. Among children who share nudes, 50% have shared with someone they haven't met in real life. And among students who have shared nudes, 41% report they shared with someone 18 or older. 25% say they've seen non-consensually shared or reshared self-generated child sexual abuse material. And then 62% of students blame the resharer. But it doesn't really matter where the blame lies once the image is out there. But basically, I think there are other studies. I know this is a US study. There are other studies done in Australia and the UK that have similar stats. So generally, fewer than 20% of students are sharing. However, it's definitely occurring at our schools. I know of many cases at international schools where this has become an issue. And students are talking about it, whether it's happening or not. Students are aware and talking about this trend, which is, I'm sure, why you were all interested in coming to this training today. With that,
Debbie, there's a lot of statistics up here and numbers. We're going to be sharing these slides with folks afterwards. So
thank you.
They'll have a copy. They'll have a copy of this. Thanks for asking that, Keith.
Thank you for the reminder. Okay, with that, I will turn it over to Ian, who will start with disclosure and the first responder.
Thank you very much. So the good news is it's not happening as much as the TV shows and what we're reading in the press, but it's obviously happening. And I love that quote: "Prepare for the can't even what did it say? Prepare for the best or prepare for the worst, hope for the best." So I think an ounce of prevention is certainly a worthy goal, and that's why you're here today. That's why we've taken a level 1 training and level 2 training so that you can be responsive and be proactive in that. So let's talk about disclosure in the first responder for just a little bit. I mean, what does this look like? Is it, does someone come up and say, hey, someone's texting me on the phone? How do we find out? How are our kids reporting this? It's important to address that and to understand how disclosure and where disclosure might come from. Disclosure, it's not a neat package. Sometimes it's behaviors that are disclosure. Students' behavior is always purposeful, and there's a reason behind that. And it could very well be that the student is involved in back and forth with sexting. So understanding what it looks like is important. Having those conversations with folks is important. Preparing yourself for that disclosure. When someone discloses, are we ready to respond? And then also looking at student voice. What kind of student voice is appreciated and supported? What kind of culture do you have at your school for student voice and student advocacy coming forward? Sarah, you asked a question about the differences between Anglo-Australian US data and those from other cultural contexts. That's a great question. The reality is that data is just more prevalent from Anglo-Australian US data, although South Africa is certainly a leader in some of this data and research as well, and putting statistics out. Quite frankly, many countries around the world are not putting out this kind of data, this kind of research to help us move forward.
We did look, and it just isn't there yet.
Yeah.
I hope it comes.
Yeah, like I said, I do know that South Africa has done a lot of work in that area. So if you could go ahead and switch the slide, I appreciate that, Debbie. As we look at our pathways for response, do the kids know who they need to talk to? Is it clear? Is it clear that do they know who they can talk to? Is it just the counselor at your school? Is it the principal? Is it the head teacher? Are there multiple pathways to report and to talk about being involved with sexting as a student? How do you build trust within your school? Surprisingly, you don't build trust in the middle of an incident. You build trust long before. You have a culture of feedback. If school, in fact, one of the schools in Riyadh shared with me once that they involve the kids in student agency so often that the kids have this natural understanding that when they talk, people listen, people respond to their feedback, they have a voice in their school. Can you build this within your school? Do kids have a voice? Are you surveying them for good things, whether how much homework, how are you feeling today? Are you surveying students, allowing them feedback during the good days, so that you build a culture that they feel comfortable sharing, but most importantly, not only sharing, knowing that you're going to act and react responsibly, and that you are going to help them move forward. And you can just imagine how your reaction can inadvertently absolutely destroy disclosure. This is no different than any child protection work we do. Your reaction, I don't believe you, well, what did you say to him? Just that instant reaction, or yeah, okay, put that away, not now, can absolutely destroy a culture of disclosure at your school. When that child goes back, talks to a peer and says, hey, I tried to disclose, but they wouldn't listen, they didn't care, they didn't have time. That's going to spread like wildfire, and no one's going to disclose. So you really have to be proactive in setting up that school culture, a school environment where students feel comfortable sharing, they understand someone is reading, someone is listening, and someone's responding in an appropriate way. So in the next slide here, I just put here, so you're the lucky one. Someone comes to you, and I really mean that in sincerity. The fact that a child feels comfortable disclosing to you is really an honor. It's an uncomfortable honor because you now are required to act, as I'm sure many of your schools have mandated reporting policies in place. Now you're required to act. So your reaction is number one, be calm, don't panic. Don't panic. Listen. Use your judgment. Is this child in immediate danger? Will this child be hurt by others? Are they exposed to harm? Is it preeminent in terms of the next hour or the next day? Make that kind of determination as that first responder. Again, don't show signs of, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Really temper your reaction. I'm here for you. How can I help? How can I help? Validate their feelings. Thank you for being here. This must be painful. How can I help? Make sure that they understand you've got their back. Don't make false promises, but make sure they understand that they've done the right thing by talking to you and that you are going to help them. Believe the child. This is the most important aspect. In fact, so important is this that psychologists are now saying that the healing process for a child cannot even begin until they feel that their story is believed. And of course, when you're dealing with kids and child protection, you have to ask yourself that question: who has more to lose here? And what obstacles has a child gone through to disclose to you? So listen, believe, be non-judgmental, have empathy, and make sure that the child understands they've done the right thing. Don't wait for the long weekend to be over. If a child discloses in the middle of winter holiday, that's the time to act. Don't delay. When seeking information, tell me more about that. Tell me more about that. Try and be very open and broad without having leading questions. Don't interview for pain, is what they call it. Just ask them to tell me your story. I'm listening. I'm here for you. Be very careful not to take notes. Don't interrupt. Don't make assumptions, and don't be distracted. I know that if you're one of those people that really needs to take notes because you're worried, let the child know what you're doing. Say very explicitly, I'm taking notes because your story is important. I want to make sure I understand. I want to make sure I get this down. But be very careful, be very transparent with it, because you don't want the child being distracted by that and thinking that you're writing something that might not be in support of their disclosure to you. I'm sorry, there's a comment here on the right that says school culture, completely with school culture. As a consultant supporting international school, we advocate for cultured care. We're keeping children on a safe agenda in place. I guess you can all read that. I'm sorry, I don't need to read that for you. But thank you for sharing that. It's really important having that foundation where kids know that they can share. Securing evidence. I'll talk about that in just a moment. One last thing with this is don't take control of it. I know it's human instinct. I want to solve this for you. Let me take over. Really help the child be in control of the situation wherever possible. What do you think we should do next? How can I help you do that? How can I help you secure, not secure, excuse me, I got distracted by the comment there. How can I help you take charge of this? If we can get to that point, it's really an important aspect. Thank you very much. Debbie, if you could go ahead and switch that. So what the expert, sorry, thank you. What the experts say, don't blame the victim, let the victim participate in the decision making. Do not view the images. When possible, do not view the images that are being shared. Save the evidence, but instruct others to delete images. So save the evidence, but if there's a group of folks, have them delete that from their phones, but save the evidence. Now, this sounds like a very interesting juxtaposition. How do you save the evidence without looking at the evidence? Well, you have to do your best to make sure that you secure the evidence. The question about securing the evidence is know the laws of your country. That's very important. Now, let's just take, for example, if you confiscate someone's phone and you look through that phone, you could lose all access and private, especially in Europe. I know of one case in Paris where the phone was confiscated. The school looked at it, discovered not only were there inappropriate images and text, but he was also selling drugs on the side. And because they invaded his privacy by looking at the phone, they almost got taken to the court and cleaned out. So know your laws. But one thing for sure is you can confiscate a phone, put it in a safe, and wait for the authorities, or wait for the embassy, or wait for advice going forward. In most cases, you have the right to do that as a school. You're protecting the evidence, but you're not looking at it, you're not sharing it. Again, if you know your law, so if in fact the crime has been broken, then you need to go ahead and do that. Are there circumstances when you have to look at the images? I can't think of any, because I think that a child can I can't think of any. You can if you see a bunch of kids looking at images, you can tell by their reaction there's something that's not appropriate on there. You can close that and go forward. Now, you certainly can invite the parents in, and the parents can look at their child's material. But no, generally speaking, again, know the laws of your country, because that will guide you. But certainly the UK and European Union have very strong laws in regards to looking at and opening up personal images from students. If you need to, contact the sharing platform and see how they can help. In this day and age, most platforms are very helpful when a law has been broken, or child protection, or child trafficking, or inappropriate images have been shared illegally. No laws. In the United States, it's illegal. In the UK, it's illegal. In Australia, it's illegal to share images. It doesn't matter whether you're coerced or not. It's illegal to share images, and that's a very important aspect to know. What's really important is don't ever have someone forward you the images or send emails, because you yourself as an adult can also now fall on, because you viewed images, you receive images on your computer that are illegal. So you have to be very careful with that. If we could go to the next slide, I'd appreciate that. So one of the things that's important is understanding what's normal sexual behavior. And this is one of the greatest resources out there, in my opinion, from Brook Traffic Light, brook.org.uk. They have a very simple chart here that really breaks it down to what is typical behavior, green light behavior, normal behavior. What is amber, and then what is the red behavior. So it really helps you understand what this means. Where do you save the images? When you delete the images from a student's phone? What you do is you preserve the evidence. So the first phone that comes forward that's got the issues on it, I actually think they tell you to put it in a Ziploc, wrap it in tin foil, and put it in your lead-lined safe. Now, the rest of the kids involved delete these images, right? Because you've preserved the evidence, you've preserved that evidence. So that's what they recommend. The idea with this Brook Light scale is that you can better understand as an adult what is appropriate behavior, what's not appropriate behavior. For example, green behaviors are kids being curious about themselves, touching themselves, games with mummies and daddies and doctors and nurses, enjoying being naked and being free. Those are parts of normal behaviors. Where when you go into that amber range there, maybe a child is preoccupied with adult sexual behavior, pulling kids' pants down or pulling skirts up. Those are behaviors that are in that amber area. And then of course, red behaviors are persistent behaviors, persistent sexual behaviors, sexual conversations, sexual languages that's not appropriate for their age. So having an idea of what is developmentally appropriate is important. How to guide you in dealing with and helping students preemptively as well as reactively. If we could go ahead and switch that next slide, please. So look at the range of harmful or problematic sexual behavior. You get the normal range that's developmentally accepted, that's socially acceptable, that's consensual, that's mutual reciprocal. And it's basically a shared decision making. That's the normal area. However, having said that, Under the age of 18 in many countries, sharing materials, there is no consent. So someone sharing pictures, naked pictures of themselves under the age of 18, there is no consent in many countries. Someone shared with me that maybe in Latin America, there was an age of 16 that made a difference. But again, know the laws of your country. And obviously that range of, are there physical, physically violent sexual abuse, highly intrusive, and even going down to that extreme of sadism. Camille shares that she uses this table recently to help decision-making about an incident. Yeah, thank you. But understanding what that normal range of behavior is by age is really important. And that the resource that I shared is an outstanding resource for that. If we could go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So what do we say to kids? What do we say to parents? This is a really important aspect of building that school culture. What questions are we asking ourselves before we respond? So knowing how to respond, training your teachers how to respond, how to receive information, be empathetic, be listeners, having open-ended questions is really important to train folks on. As adults, we want to investigate. I think we've all watched too much QSI. We want to find the prepared. We want to help. We want to solve the problem. And really, what we need to do is listen to our kids and deal with it in terms of culture and look at our school in a large perspective, but also let the professionals come in and handle these cases. What questions we need to ask ourselves before we respond to a concern? Ask yourself, this child in front of me, what have they risked to come talk to me? And you think about it from that perspective. If you can get into those shoes, what obstacles have they overcome to get to this point? They've been pushed to a point to talk to an adult about something that's very awkward and very difficult to talk about. So if you have that empathy and that perspective, you will be automatically a great first responder because you're just being empathetic and you're understanding, and it's not easy to come forward. And if you can just have that in your mindset, that's absolutely important. Our top priority has to be protection of our kids, the protection of our kids. If we could go to the next slide, I'd appreciate that. Here's the sympathy. I love this quote from Christopher Robinson. Promise me you'll always remember you're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. Disclosure, there's no shame in disclosure. And I know many cultures, there's years and years and years of shame regarding disclosure. You have to help your kids understand that, the kids that you serve. You need to help them understand that it's okay and there's no shame and that you're here to protect them. And most importantly, it's not their fault. It's not their fault. That has to be a very repetitive thing. Obviously, we want to avoid blame, our reactions. Understanding where they are, how strong are they coming forward to you, will help you understand what to do next. Hopefully you have in your school a child protection team that you can bring this forward to. Maybe you have a designated child protection welfare person that's in your school, safeguarding expert that you can bring this forward to. If you could go to the next slide, I'd appreciate that. So when you hear something, it's always important to circle back. It's always important. This is something that I really have a hard time with, maybe just being a man. I don't want to blame all the men in the world, but using silence is very powerful. I want to hear your story. Tell me what happened. I'm here for you. Using silence, those pauses, is very powerful. Always remembering that student safety. Take the device, turn it off, turn it in, right? Tinfoil, follow your school policies, and store it for the professionals to come in and look at that. Again, build student agency, build and respect student agency. Student agency does not come in the time of the crisis. It comes years before, and you build that as a culture. Be very careful and clear about confidentiality. Someone coming to you and disclosing is not for the school lounge, it's not for the gossip, it's not for WhatsApp and all those things, right? But you have an obligation as a mandated reporter to bring it forward in the safety of the child. You cannot promise a child, I won't tell anybody. You have to be honest and say, listen, you are in danger. I need to help you. I need to bring this forward. And again, having good policy in place gives you a third point of expert reference. It is tremendously helpful. Listen, it's policy. I have to bring this forward, right? That's a very different statement, and the child will hear that as opposed to, I'm bringing this forward. I'm the one. No, we want to bring this forward because it's policy. It is what we do at our school. You did the absolute right thing. This is not your fault. You did the absolute right thing in coming forward. Thank you. This is also very important, is once that disclosure comes to you, you need to work with the right people in your school to ensure there's a safety plan with the student and the family. The family needs to be brought in, and you need to, this has nothing to do with the legal aspect, you need to socially and emotionally be able to support that child, not only tonight when they go home, but also their reentry plan to schools. And I think many schools fail in this area. Many schools react and solve and work hard to deal with the crisis, but then it seems like it dissipates. But spending a tremendous amount of time and energy on the reentry plan, how will that child reenter and see their peers who are now talking about them in the context of the sexting issue that's come up? So it's very important. And of course, be on the alert for retribution and backlash. So student safety, and again, having a plan in place. Thank you. If you could go ahead and switch that. These are pretty significant. It's all red flags, but this is where, to me, there's a significant elevation. We have been talking, the examples that I've been pulling from and referring to are often, basically a student is sending texts, but obviously that's not only, there's a lot of online grooming that goes on, catfishing, I think they call that. And so when you suspect an adult involved, boom, that's a huge escalation. Coercion or blackmail, that's a huge escalation. Extreme or violent images or conversations or texting back and forth. Victim under the age of consent, what is the law? Under 16, under 18, what is your law? And then of course, immediate risk of harm. These are your significant red flags this is must be brought forward. Thank you very much, right on. So what can schools do? Number one, of course, we just talked about disclosure, what it looks like. So you've got to you got to train and prepare your kids. But really, to me, it's almost like that house built on sand. That house built on sand. You want to make sure you got a foundation in place. If you could go to the next slide, please. First, starting with policies. Do you have policies specifically related to sexting and the illicit sharing of material amongst your kids? Do you have regulations and procedures for what to do when that comes up and when that occurs? Does the board sign off on this? Do they say, hey, we agree, this is important? Your policies and procedures are really the foundation. Often people get caught up in the term whistleblowing. Do you have whistleblowing policy? Well, if you have a policy that's a mandated reporter and it's ratified by your board, and the board has gone through legal aspects, you're 100% protected as a teacher, as a whistleblower, because you're following policy. So make sure that not only you have specific policy on sexting, but you also have policy that goes deeper into that, use of your technology, use of platforms, on your policy on extortion, policy on bullying, that also weaves nicely into sexting as a part of that. Don't make sexting separate, incorporate it into that, the handling of that. Next slide, please. Protecting the children, that's your number one job, and that's all inclusive. That's all inclusive. Do your teachers model you know, I was in the first grade classroom the other day, and the teachers were doing, I don't know what it was, some kind of, they all had iPads in front of them and they're taking their pictures. And one of the kids reached up and took the teacher's picture. And she says, hold on a minute. Did I give consent? Did I say it was okay to have my picture on your computer? So we can engage in conversations as young as first grade with that conversation about our commitment to protecting children in this digital era, this digital age. Own it. Look at these statistics. Although it's less than all of us thought, it's around. I mean, remember, I love that technology statement. Boy, your iPhone today could, in 1968, could send 4 or 5 rockets to the moon. What do we expect kids are doing with their phones? We give them these incredible, powerful tools, and we've got to help them. We've got to teach. We've got to share their understanding. Do we talk to about kids? It's like one of the #1 problems is that when you share an image, you lose control of that image. That's not the way our kids think. You know, infallible, right? So train not just your child protection team, but train as many people as you can to be on the lookout, to be aware of sexting and the trade of this material. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. With our, not only do we want to train our teachers, Daddy, if you can go to the next slide, we want to have conversations about this. Who are we talking to about sexting and the trade of explicit materials and pictures? Are we engaging with our parents about it? Do our parents, do we have the courage? It really is about courage, but surprisingly, once you start, you realize that courage and fear of that was actually very much a misdemeanor. Almost everyone I've talked to, once they break that ice, parents are concerned and they see that you're concerned. It's amazing that what we're afraid of, what we're tiptoeing around really is an honest conversation. Understanding what consent is, understanding the developmental appropriate behavior of what students can and can't do through the natural exploratory of their bodies and others. Help kids know what their rights are. They have the right to not be bullied. They have the right to attend school without fear. They have the right to their body. They have the right to not, to say no to bullying, to tell children, hey, bug off. I'm not sharing a picture of me. Are you nuts? You know, they have the right to do that. And we need to make sure they know that. They know that. This is just kind of a scale here that goes everything, helps us understand consent, compliance, pressure, coercion, and force, and the differences between those things. And again, one of the important things is that consent is not a lifetime contract, right? Consent is at the moment. At any second, consent can be pulled back. So that's also something that we need to teach. What started off as a good idea may quickly spiral into the mind of a child and realize, whoops, this wasn't a good idea. Stop. So that's an important aspect too. If we could go to the next slide, I'd appreciate that. Of course, I've talked already about student agency, building that culture long before the crisis comes, long before you're dealt with a significant case. Letting our kids know that we value their input, we read their input. We don't have to always act, but we need to let them know that we've read it. Again, having those clear pathways published and out there for all to see. These are the pathways at our school. Here's how we report not only child protection issues, but sexting issues and everything under that window, and guys. On the next slide here, I apologize, I'm really getting fast because we're going to do a case study that's important. And so, of course, when we talk with parents, talk about the signs of what sexting looks like. You know, as the kids become, staying up later at night, being more secretive, all of a sudden there's a little more stress about, I need to get online, I need to be online, what are people saying? One of the biggest signs of issues of concern is when your child has a site or has a post, whatever, and she's gone from 25 followers to 5,000 followers in 24 hours. That's a pretty significant red flag. Something potentially may be awake, or she may have a fantastic Jello video that's gone viral, but it's worthy for a parent. It's worthy of looking into. Academic decline, mental health issues, pulling away from family. All these are very similar, of course, with any child protection kind of behaviors that manifest themselves after action. Next slide, please. This is very interesting research here. Basically, it's no surprise. Kids and families that talk about it have less incidents of it happening. Letting our kids know that once you send it, you lose control. You will never be able to control that image again. So again, some of these things that we need to make sure our kids know. Again, developmentally, understand the law. They know the law of the country. So when a child is asking or extorting a child to send an image, do they realize that that's against the law? And what a great pushback. You realize this is against the law is a very powerful statement for someone to say. If we could go to the next page. All right, so here are some parent prevention tips. Again, it starts with a conversation. If you have the courage to talk about it with your kids, you're on the first step going forward. But you need to know it's okay. The parents, schools need to let parents know that that's an okay conversation to have. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and skip. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide here. Sorry. Actually, let's go with why not, and we'll skip the next one. There are so many reasons why not. Why not to get involved? The law, our reputation. It's not my job. You kidding? My job's hard enough. There's all sorts of reasons. But for every reason that we don't want to get involved in a child protection issue or involved with helping kids with sexting, ask that next follow-up question. At what cost? At what cost? And what disservice we're doing to the kids under our care. So there's a lot of reasons to not do this. Fear of the law, again, retribution, reputation. What if I'm wrong? I don't believe this kid. There's just, own that. Put that bias on the table. Engage in conversations. All right, Debbie, I think we need to jump right into your case study right now about sexting. And again, none of our cases ever shared with ICMEP are made up for the sake of making up. All of the cases shared are based on genuine and real cases. So Debbie, I'm gonna hand it over to you. Thank you very much. I apologize for the 100-mile-an-hour speech. There's so much information here, so thank you. Debbie, you with me?
That was working that whole time, and now it's saying unstable. So am I coming through clearly, Ian?
You are, and you look stable.
Okay, good. I'm leaving, well, because I turned my video off to hopefully save. Okay. So thank you, Ian. Briefly, before we jump into the case. So basically, an aggravated incidence of sexting is when it has criminal or abusive elements. It might be sharing images with an adult, sharing with intent to harm, or reckless misuse that might cause harm. And experimental incidents of sexting include romantic. It might be fully consensual in a one-on-one relationship. It might be attention seeking, where somebody's just trying something out and seeing what happens, or it could fall under other, like a child taking pictures with no sexual motive or intent to share those images. So this is, again, in that resource document. And I think what I'll do is we'll talk about this in the whole group. So I'll use the chat, and then I'll send you to the breakout room to discuss the second slide when we get to it. So this case study is something that has really happened at an international school recently. So 5 13-year-old girls go to the counselor and report that a boy in their class is pressuring them to send nudes. The boy and the girls are all in a group chat together. The girls report the boy sent a nude to them. It made them feel uncomfortable, but they didn't share at that point. They're reporting now because of the pressure the boy's putting on them to return the favor. And they ask that you please don't involve their parents. So in thinking about these typographies of sexting, remember, aggravated is something criminal or intent to harm, abusive. Experimental is just either consensual or trying things out. If you could put in the chat, initially, what does this seem like to you? Aggravated or experimental based on the information that you have right now?
Aggravated, experimental, aggravated, experimental, aggravated. Seems like a pretty mix. Initially experimental, maybe shifting to aggravated. Experimental.
So perfect. This is illustrating why I thought this case would be an interesting one to discuss today, because it does have elements of both, right? Like it, as far as experimental, it could fall under this attention seeking. Could certainly be some kids just experimenting, figuring it out, trying different things. There does also seem to be some pressure though. And as Ian said toward the end of his time about that pressure can cause students to feel the same stress as if they were sexually harassed. So sexually harassed or sexually abused. So in that way, it could be reckless misuse. Maybe the intent to harm wasn't there, but the harm can still be done. So I think it very well illustrates how it can be difficult to define these. However, we know that harm is being done. So now we just have to figure out the intent. So what are your next 3 steps? Or maybe let's all put one next step that you want to do in this case. What's one of the first things that you're going to do now that the girls have come and told you this?
Lots of thought involved here. Immediately go to the child safeguarding person, find out more information, ask open-ended questions, report it to the child safety officer at the school. Again, seek more information, report to the DSL. Secure one of the phones, okay. Find out more information. Involve the counselor's office. We got a little bit of a pause here in thoughts. Listen, tell them that they did the right thing. Refer to the school policy. Thank you. What's the policy say? Seek more information. Did we just lose her entirely? Oh, no, she's here. Do we know who the boy is? Have the girls?
I got dropped. I'm sorry. I'm going to start sharing.
That's okay. Again, using your child protection team, child protection officer, lots of comments like that in the chat here. Obviously, a very
awesome,
experienced group here. Thank you.
Fantastic, awesome, and hopefully one of the first things that team would want to do.
Oh,
document. Excellent. Yeah, document. Bring it to the team. And what about asking the girls' requests that you don't involve their parents? Hopefully the response there would be, this is not a secret we can keep for you. We're going to involve your parents in this. Okay, so this school, one of the first things this school did, which I agree with, is they brought the boy in to hear what he had to say about the incident. So the child protection officer brings the boy in for a talk and asks him, if the child protection officer were to look through the group chat, what would they see? They're not going to look in the group chat because they don't want to see the images, but they're just asking the boy, if I look in this chat, what am I going to see? He says in the chat, the girls pressured him to send a picture of his penis. They promised if he went first, they would follow and share their own pictures, their own nude pictures. After several days of pressure, he gave in, sent his picture, and then he asked them to share theirs, and they refused and went and turned him in to the counselor. When you talk to the girls again, they reluctantly admit that yes, this version is the true story. They ask you again, please don't tell our parents. So assuming you've let the children know we are going to involve your parents in this, I would, do we have? I think we can go to chat rooms for about 3 minutes, and I would like you just very quickly in chat rooms to talk about how will you support the students and how will you inform the parents? So those two things, what student support do you need and what will you tell the parents? So Abby, if you could send everybody to breakout rooms for 3 minutes. Mary, did you get assigned a breakout room? Oh, and Jeff, there's a few people still here, I see.
They should be starting to come back.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Okay, great. Great. See, almost everybody is back. If you don't mind each putting in the chat, one thing you talked about that would support the students and one idea for sharing with the parents. I'm actually going to stop my share so I can see the chat. What do you do when you feel talking to the parents may expose the student to harm? That is a great and huge question. I think the best thing there is to talk with your child protection team about how to talk to these parents. And and how to get the support for the child that's needed. And I think there's certainly, okay, good. I'm going to get to that question in a moment. Ensure students don't understand the support available. Good. A plan, yes. Safety planning for sure. I see lots of planning in here for the student. Steps to inform parents. Good. And have the meeting in person with parents, absolutely. So being transparent with students, supporting the students, good. Someone said, Suzanne says, try to support the students to tell parents while you're together. Okay, so one solution for if students say, my parents are going to be so angry they might hurt me, then talk with the student, give them choices about how you can inform the parents. I think in situations like this, we have to assume, you know, certainly in a group like this, you're not going to keep it secret from all the parents. So it's highly likely that all parents are going to find out, and you don't want them to find out that the school knew and didn't tell them. So you've got to inform the parents. So the best way to do it is to give the child choices in how they're going to help you to talk to their family. Maybe that means making a phone call with you in the room. Maybe it's a face-to-face meeting with all of you. Maybe they'd rather you talk to them and first normalize it. You know, explain that sexting can be a fairly normal experimental behavior for the age range of the student, if that's true. Just give the child choices in how you go about doing it. Did you want to add to that, Ian?
No, I was just going to say, Mary brings up a really good point that the boy needs support as well. So it's
Absolutely.
As a school, as an international school, you play more of a part in that role as to what's your re-entry plan for the boy at some point as well.
The boy might actually need more support because in truth, you know, it's kind of hard to say who's the victim here, but you know, I think looking at some of the charts, this is well within the range of normal experimental sexual behavior for 13-year-old students. Unfortunately, it now involves a digital photo that's out there. So we do have to deal with it in that way. But I think that all the students in this situation need as much support as possible. And the boy is the one who was initially pressured over several days before sending, and he's the one who actually sent the photo. So he's the one that might experience the most trauma out of this situation in the end. So the boy absolutely needs a ton of support. The girls do too, though. And I think some people mentioned in here child protection curricula, which is a great way to address this with the entire class, to go through those lessons with the whole class. And speaking with the class about digital print and how it stays. And once the picture's out there, you can't have it back. So yeah, there's a lot about here about lessons for students. Okay. Abby, I don't know if you need to cut us off. If you don't, I'm happy to stay here if anybody has questions. And Ian, I don't know if you're able to stick around, but I can stay for about 10 minutes if anyone has questions. If you do need to go, I want to thank you very much for coming today. And I'll put my email in the chat. I'm happy to share it out with you as well via Abby, in case you have questions that come up afterwards.
Yeah, we can keep for 10 minutes.
Sorry, Debbie.
Well, thank you, Abby. Okay, Abby said we can stick around for 10 minutes if you have a question.
Perfect.
Sorry, Ian.
I've got to run. I've got someone knocking on my door here. I want to thank everyone very much. The important aspect here is that you are not a professional in this, but this is a conversation starter. This is the kind of thing you bring back to your peers and say, I heard this. What do we have for here? What do we have in place? This is just a conversation starter. And to me, it all begins with a conversation. So thank you very much for your time, Debbie. Great job. And thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Ian, for all that you shared. I really appreciate you sharing this with me today. All right. But I'll be here if you have a question. Yeah, thank you all for coming. Okay, what do you do when reporting to parents and they say they're okay with it? In general, so the best thing is if proactively you have shared out beforehand with all of your families what you consider different forms of abuse, child protection issues, and when you'll get involved, so that they would expect that if in the case of sexting gets reported to you, you will get involved. However, If maybe you have done that and the parents still say, whatever, we don't care, this is normal. In that case, you deal with it as school as best as you can. And this is a good, generally at international schools, you need to deal with a situation where you have control over it, and that's during the school day. So even if something occurs outside of school, if it's happening within the school, I mean, if it's affecting the school because it happened between students, then you deal with it within the school as well as you can. Whether that means making sure students are safe during the school day because they're not safe outside of school, or whether it means that students have consequences at school because they won't have them outside. You're still giving the same levels of support and education and everything as you would, whether you have the parent support or not. Who should carry out the investigation, the counselor or the DSL? Ideally, well, okay, first I want to just clarify, we don't have, as international educators, we don't have the power to do an investigation and actually make a decision about a case. We can do an inquiry, which is just looking into it, finding out the information we need so that we know how to respond. So I think that's what you mean by investigation. So when you're doing your inquiry to just figure out what, good, I see a thumbs up, thank you. When you're figuring out what's going on so that you know how to respond, I would say in this case, since the counselor is the trusted adult, it would be great if the counselor and the designated safeguarding lead are two different people. It's great if they collaborate. Often at a lot of schools, the counselor is the designated safeguarding lead. However, they should still have a team behind them. So you can bring this to the team and decide who is best situated to do further inquiry and figure out what's going on, and then to provide student support afterwards. Does that answer your question, Mary? Okay, good. I'm sorry if I missed any other questions in the chat. This is going really quickly. If I missed another question, please either type it again or raise your hand and I will. Okay, any other questions at all?
Sorry, I'm
Oh,
gonna write in the chat. How do you deal with the peers? Usually the student peers, the student environment, the culture, they know pretty quickly what's going on.
Absolutely, they're going to know what's going on. Great question. So I think the whole class certainly needs to be addressed about sexting. Hopefully, if you have a child protection curriculum in place, hopefully that's part of your child protection curriculum, and you can time those lessons to be given now as the sexting incident is going on. If you don't have a child protection curriculum in place, I did see a lot in the chat about just talking to students, honestly, about a lot of what was presented here today, about, you know, that the school is a safe place. If something's going on online that's gotten out of your control, do come talk to us, we can help. We're not going to judge each other about this. However, we shouldn't be pressuring each other about this either. And once an image is out there, you're not going to get it back. So let's, you know, let's have an honest conversation about this now. And I would guess that students do have a lot to say on this topic. So once you've given them some information, you can allow the class to talk about their concerns and fears with you when it comes to the issue of sexting. So I would definitely have a whole, I generally work with smaller schools, so I'm using the singular word class, but I think, you know, if you have multiple 13-year-old classes, certainly it's a time to brief all of them and bring them all in and make sure that everybody is aware of the fact that they can talk about sexting with you and that it is something that they need to be aware of the dangers of and just know what they're getting into if it's something that they choose to engage in. Does that help, Alexandra? Okay, good. Okay. When another parent reports the counselor but wants to stay anonymous. In general, it's okay to allow a parent to stay anonymous because that's just the start of the inquiry. And we do want to allow anonymous reporting at our schools because it means you're going to get more reports. So in general, you can respect the anonymity of a reporter unless that reporter is saying that they're in danger or that they are causing harm to somebody else. Then you can't, or that they might endanger themselves. You know, those are the three rules of counseling and confidentiality. So those apply to all child protection concerns as well. But in general, if somebody's just reporting to you, they can remain anonymous. You need to also let them know, though, that unless it's their child they're reporting about, you're not going to share anything you find out back with them. So if I tell the counselor about my son's friend, I then don't have a right to find out what happens with my son's friend. That information's out. And in one slide, additional risks for boys were mentioned. Ian had that on the slide, I believe, from past experience, that is just that, you know, we often when we're talking about sexual abuse, we often minimize its effects on boys. And so they don't get the same support as girls often do. So I think that's what that's referring to, but I will check with Ian. And if that's not correct, I will ask Abby to send out a correction to you. But I think it's just the idea that frequently we think like, oh, if a boy is given a sexual image or given some sexual attention, whether they want it or not, it doesn't harm them like in the way that it would a girl if she's given the same unwanted images or attention, but it does. And then they don't get this support for that, or they might, for whatever reason, pretend that they don't need it and not accept the support that they're offered. So do make an extra effort when a boy is the victim in it or involved, whether victim or not, but involved in any kind of sexual misconduct, that they also get the support that they need. These are great questions. Anything else? Okay, thank you all very much. I'm sorry the session went so quickly today, but it was great.
Thank you very much.